Hi there, it's Winston here, and we're still on CSS, and today we'll be looking at advanced CSS, the box model, and layout. So you might be wondering, what's the box model about? Well, it's not a box, well, but it's still a box too. So we're going to see what the CSS box model is about and what layouts mean. So let's jump right into it. So in our last class, we were able to look at some very basic styling, yeah, and we focused more on the font. But today we're going to be introducing some new tags, some very new tags, right? So to do this, I'm going to be creating a new page. So I'll save this page as page4.html. Yeah, that's good. Now we're going to be learning something else again. Aside the box model, the last part I made mention of 3 ways of writing CSS. So we worked with 2. So we looked at the inline CSS and we looked at CSS in the head. Now in this class we're going to be looking at the external CSS. The external CSS. Now you might be wondering what the external CSS is all about. Well, it's very cool. Very cool. Because remember when we were writing our code, the code will begin to look a bit long. Well, they are not really that long. But consider when your site becomes big, that means your CSS codes will look bigger. Now, in order for us to maintain these codes properly, we need to write these codes properly. Now, there's one thing about programming, it's not just about you writing your code, it's also writing these codes and making them easy for you to maintain. When I say maintain, I mean changing it in future. So if you want to change something, it doesn't become stressful for you. Although when doing it the first time, I feel like it's something you can remember. But trust me, after 2 weeks, you'll forget how you wrote that code. So now, one of the ways where we can write our code and make it easy to maintain, especially with CSS, is using external CSS. Now, how do we use the external CSS? Now, let's go straight to it. So now I'm having this page 4.html. I'm going to introduce a new element, and this is called a div. Well, it's one of the most popular elements. So this is the first time we're hearing about it in this class. A div, right? So a div in itself doesn't really do much. It's just blank, right? So let me show you what it looks like. So I have a div element here, and I have h3. I'll write something inside here. Let's say programming is fun, because programming is actually fun. Then I'll stop my server and restart it again, so I'll come to my page 4. Yeah, so that programming is fun. It shows normally we are not seeing the div anyway, but it's there. So what is the div all about? Now the div in itself doesn't really do much without CSS. So CSS gives it the value, right? CSS makes it look like what we want. Now see the div as a box, and you can make it look anyhow you want it to look. You want to look like a box, a square, a triangle, anyhow you want it, you can do that. It's very cool to use. And we're going to be styling this div now using external CSS. Now for us to use external CSS, the first step is we need to create a new file. Now we're going to save this file with the .css extension. Remember when I told you in the first class about extensions? Yes. So CSS also has its own extension, which is the .css. So I'm going to say call this page for .css. So we have the page 4.html and the page 4.css. Actually, the name can be anything, it doesn't have to be the same, right? But just to make it easy for me and you to understand, I'm using the page 4.css. Now we have page 4.html and page 4.css. Now how do we make this work? We have to link our CSS to the HTML. Now this is how linking works. HTML is the main guy, right? CSS is the side guy. So without HTML, CSS cannot work. So that's why we need to link the CSS to the HTML. Really, the HTML is what we see on the browser. So wherever file is linked to the HTML, that's what we can see. So that's why we are going to be linking the CSS to the HTML and not linking the HTML to the CSS. So get that scope. Now how do we link it? So we can link a CSS file here by using the link tag. So generating a link tag gives you this guy that has 2 attributes, the rel and the href. Forget about the rel, focus on the href. What is the href? So the href is basically talking about the file that you want to link. In this case, it's our page 4.css. So go ahead and put page 4.css. Congratulations, you finally linked the CSS to the HTML, and very easy. Now let's style this div. Now remember, the div is just a box. It doesn't really do much. So if I want to style it, because I'll be having lots of divs, I'm going to be giving this div a class. I will give it a class of hero. Looks like something nice will happen here. So I'm giving it a class of hero, right? Doesn't really do anything. Hero is just a class that I'm giving to it, and it doesn't really do much until I say so. So on my CSS, I'll be targeting my hero. Now I'm going to be styling it. So the first style that I want to give to it is the background color. Now the background color, same color, and now background color. So the background color will be on the background. So what color will I want to give to it? Now this is another point here. You're already familiar with the names of colors. We have the white, black, and all of that stuff. But there are some colors that do not have names. And I'm not talking about the Nigerian names, like when you have orange, you now have burnt orange and that stuff. So we can't really write burnt orange here. Now there's a second way of, or a different way of naming colors, which is using the hex code. That's the hexadecimal code. Now the hexadecimal code is more universal, right? Because with the hexadecimal code, you can use it to represent any color at all. Aside the hexadecimal code, we also have the RGB, that's the red, green, and blue combination. But most likely, most people use the hex code. So how do we use the hex code? So if you don't know the hex code of the color, it's more difficult for you to use. But if you know the hex code, no problem. So what I can do is, let me say I wanted, I'm just going to show you how I can get a good color. So let me say I use blue. Now blue itself is not a very nice color for designing, because for you might feel okay, it looks good, but I'm not really a fan of it. So if I want to switch this blue, if I put my mouse on it, I'll see this color palette that comes up. Now any color I selected to generate the RGB version of it. So you can use this color wheel to switch between colors and get the exact color you want. Now this is very good when you don't have a color in mind. If you already have a color in mind, you can just get the hex code of the color or the RGB of the color. That's when the color doesn't have a name. So I'm just going to switch here and choose the color that I like. The color that I like is looking like this guy. So I have this color. Yeah, if you like it, you can use it. If you don't like it, you can still change it. So whatever color of your choice. So now, let's say I'm using this, alright? Now looking at this, we'll notice something, that we are now seeing this background color extending to the end of the page. That is the div, right? So automatically the div is taking the height of whatever is inside. Because we have only one line of text, so the div is taking that height. But the width is automatically stretching through. So what I mean is, if I have two lines of text, automatically looks bigger, taking that length or that height. So that's okay for now. Now there's something else, which is the box model, what the box model is really about. Now what is really the box model? Now let's look at it. So the box model talks about three properties. It talks about the margin, the border, the padding. Then we have the content, of course. And you'll notice that we have the 4 different directions. We have the top, right, bottom, and left. So this is what the box model is about: the margin, the border, and the padding. So very quickly, we're going to explore these different properties. Now the padding adds space inside an element. The margin adds space outside an element, while the border adds a line around an element. So let's verticalize this and let's see. If you watch very carefully, you'll notice that programming is fun, is inside this box, and it's touching the 4 corners, not really the 4 corners down. but it's touching the corners of it. Very little space is left, right? So now the border is not visible here, but the space that we're going to add inside this box is what is called the padding. So from the slide, you see that the padding adds space inside an element. So now if I want more space instead, I can go ahead and add it. But before doing that, I want my content to look longer. So let me say after my H3, I'll have a p tag. Now my p tag, normally I want to write some long text, but I'm going to generate a long text. So we'll call it the lorem text. So go ahead and type lorem, then select the selection that comes up. Yeah. So it's a very long text, so you can use this part to scroll back to where you want it to be. You can also align your codes if you want. So we have the lorem text. Yeah, we have more text here. Gradually we are getting there. So now the next thing I want here is now I want to add a button. I'm adding all these elements so our box model will be easy for us to understand. So I have a button here that says learn more. Learn more. Yes. So now this is what it is. Now let's start making this guy look fine. So the first thing that we want to do is the padding. Now the padding is the space that we have inside. So now the text is basically touching the walls, right? So for me to give it that space, I need to put a padding. So that's the name of the property. So we go to our CSS and we'll say padding. Now from the box model image, you see that we have 4 different directions. We have the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. This means you can decide to say padding top, or padding right, padding bottom, or padding left, whichever direction that we want it to be. So in this image, actually I want my padding to be everywhere. So what I'm going to do is, what I was saying earlier, I was saying, okay, I can say padding top should be like 40 pixels, right? So you see that space inside the box now, so we have the space. So this means I'm going to have another line that will say padding bottom, 40 pixels. And the spacing will be applied there. And I'll do my padding left and padding right. So that's 4 lines of codes that I'm going to write. Whereas I can make it shorter by using the shortcuts. Now the shortcut is very simple. You go top, right, bottom, left. Basically the clockwise direction. Clockwise direction, that's you go top, right, bottom, left. So I can give 4 values. So I can say the first one, that's 40 pixels will be top. Now my right, I'll say 20 pixels. Next one is bottom, 40 pixels. Last one is 20 pixels. So I set 4 values and applies like so. So we have top, right, bottom, left, right? So if I don't like the way it's looking, I can push here to like left and right. I want to be 30 pixels. Yeah, so you see that it has some breathing space around it. So now that's the power of the padding. Padding adds space inside the elements. Now the next one is the margin. Although we can see some spacing around this box, right? But if you want it to have more spacing, now remember margin adds space outside the element. So if I target my div and I'm giving it margin, it's basically going to add space outside this box. Although you see this bottom side already has lots of space, so it won't really be relevant when we're adding it. But the top, right, left will actually show. So how can I do that? So the same method I use in adding my padding, I can use the same method in adding my margin. So it starts from the top. So I'll say my top should be 20 pixels. Then my right should be, let me say 40 pixels this time. Bottom also 20 pixels, and my left should be 40 pixels. So we get this space, right? So now you notice that the margin is adding space outside the box, so it makes it to move out from the box. Now this is the margin. Very simple. Now the last one is the border. Now for this particular div, we are not seeing the border because we have not added any border. To add a border, it is more longer compared to the margin, although it also has its shortcuts. But to add a border, we need to add three properties. We need to add the border style, the border width, and the color. I'll take it again, the border style, the border width, the border color. So I'll say border style, solid. Border width, 20 pixels. Border column, let me use red so it becomes visible, right? So we have this thing. It doesn't really look nice, but that's it. So for us to have the border, we need to add those three properties, because if we omit the color, we won't really see the border. Okay, it will be there, but it will be black, right? And if we omit the width, this is the default width. If you omit the style, it's there, but it's not really showing. So if you want to change any of them, you can go ahead and change it. Now the border style here is solid by default, but we can change it to be something else. So we aside solid, we also have dashed. So the dash is going to give it this dash vibe. We also have the dotted. I'm going to change the width to be like 2 pixels so it becomes finer. So if you notice it's just small, but it's there. So whichever one that you like, you can use it based on what you're trying to achieve. Right, so now we have our border there. I'm going to leave it there. Now, aside the border with color and the style, there's also what we call the border radius. Now, the border radius is used when we want some curved edges. Now, if you watch the edges of this box, they are very sharp. It's more like they are pointed, very sharp. So what we can do, we can add a border radius. Now, adding a border radius, I can set 20 pixels. So it's going to give the edge this bit of curve to it, so it looks a bit better. For the design sake, I'm going to put 10 pixels. Yeah, so you can also make it higher than that. So that's for the border radius. Now let's look at this design. So one thing about CSS is getting to know all these properties is actually good, but you also need to know what works and what doesn't work. For example, I have this black text on a dark background. It doesn't work because you'll actually be struggling to read this text. So what you can do is can make the text lighter so it becomes easier to see. So remember, we have background color and we also have color. So background color is the color of the background, whereas the color talks about the color of the text. So I can change the color to white. Text becomes easier to see. So now I can now go ahead and style my button. So to style my button, I can target the button element and style it, so I can give it a class or I can give it an ID. So I'll just use class. I'll give it a class of BTN. Now one other thing about naming your classes, whenever you're giving your classes, try to give your classes real names that actually mean something. So it should not just be any name, it should have a meaning to it. Now I'm styling the button, I'm giving it a class of BTN, that's a shortcut for button. Right, so whenever I see BTN anywhere, I know okay, BTN means button. I'm not styling button and giving it a class of knife. It doesn't correlate. So whenever you're giving classes or IDs, try to make sure that it actually means something or easy for you to get. So I'm giving it a class of BTN. So right here, I'll target my BTN. Now, so far, with what you have learned, if you want to actually style this button, what do you think you can do to it? And the first thing I want to do is the padding, because you can notice that this guy is really boxed in. Or for example, let's take a look at these their buttons. See these their buttons, right? Looks very cool. So let's style this first one. We'll style this contact us and downloads. So this one here, we can see how it looks. So let's try to make our button look like this. So the first thing you'll notice here, it has padding. There's this cool space around it. So I'm going to give it some padding. So padding, I'll give it 2 values this time. Yeah, 2 values. I'll say 10 pixels and 15 pixels. Now when I specify 2 values, the first value will work for top and bottom. The second value will work for left and right. So top and bottom will take 10 pixels. Left and right will take 15 pixels. Remember, when you're specifying 4 values, it goes in the clockwise direction. So top, right, bottom, and left. When you're specifying 2 values, the first value goes for top and bottom, second value goes for left and right. So by doing that, my button looks a bit better. But because I like my button longer, I'll give it left and right 20 pixels. But let me make it easier for you to see. I've even left and right 200 pixels, so you see how big it is. Yeah. I'm going to leave it as 25 pixels. Now the next thing I want to do to my button is to give it the border. If you watch carefully, you notice that these guys are curved. The edges of these contactors is curved, it's not sharp like the one we have here. It's not sharp. So what I'll do here is I'll give it a border radius of, let me say, 5 pixels for a start. Now I'm giving a border radius of 5 pixels, yeah. But now you can also notice that it has a border. Now I don't really need this border, or I may need it. But to avoid that, what I'll do is, let me see if I will need the border. So I'm going to give my button, okay, so I'm going to give it the background color. Let me give the background color of white. Then I'm going to set my border width to 0. So setting my border width to 0 makes my border to disappear, right? So now I just have this normal button. Nothing serious, just a button. But let's go back to their own button. Now you see this button, alright? So yeah, the reason why I didn't set the border color is because it will make it won't look nice on this background. So it's best left as white. But if I hover on the button, now there is this effect called hover. Putting my mouse on it is called a hover effect. So this thing you see here, the color changing, is called the hover effect, and we can achieve that with CSS. So my button, I also wanted to have this hover effect, as when I put my mouse on it, the color should change. So to achieve the hover effect is with CSS. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, it's the button that I want to stand. Now this is how hover works. So you see the button, but now I'm going to add something. So target button, then I'll put this sign and say hover before I start styling. Now the sign here is a colon. So this means when I hover on this class button, so any element that has a class of btn, when I hover on it, what do I want to happen? Now the first thing I would want to happen, I want to change the background color. I'll use the same background color that I had earlier. So hovering on it, you notice it has this color. Yeah. Now the next thing I'd want to do on it is the color. That's the color of the text inside. So if I hover on it, it's black, but I want the color to be white. So you see. Then now next thing I'd want is, now I already have my border width at 0. So I'd want my border to come out when I hover on it. So I'll say border width 1 pixels. So now I'll see it here. The border comes up when I hover on it. So I can also say border column white. And I'll say border style solid. So this is what it looks like. Although we are having this size and change, this change in size when I hover on it. This is because without it being on hover, there is no border. When I hover on it, there is a border. So if I want to stop that from happening, I'll say by default my border width should be 1 pixels, right? But the border column should be default color. So this way the border will be there, but you won't really see it until you hover on it. So the border is there, but you won't see it. I can also set my border style here. Solid. So the border is here, but you're not seeing it. So only when I hover on it, now you get to see border. Right. Now this is very cool. Really cool. Really cool. So I might ask, so what is the use of this class BTN? So this means that if I have another button here, so I'm just duplicating this button now. We're going to change it to contact us. You can just copy and paste to achieve that. So I'm giving the class of BTN. So this means automatically the two buttons will look alike. So I don't need to stress myself trying to style it again or trying to get it to look like what I want. So wherever I use it, it's automatically going to work. Now this is not just for the button, also for the div. If I have a div here and let me say I put a H string, I say it's time to code. Now this div is not going to look like the first one because it doesn't have the same class. So if I want it to look alike, all I have to do is to give it a class here. So I give it a class of hero. So once I set that class hero, it automatically looks like the first one. I don't have to do much for it to look like it. So that's the advantage of using classes. So I generate a lorem text. This time I generate it twice, so it looks longer. Yeah, and I have this. So this is how targeting works using classes in an external file. So we also looked at the box model, that's the padding, the margin, and the border. We also looked at how we can style our buttons and also some other cool stuff. So in the next class, we'll be looking at some other nicer things. Now let's take a look at this page. Now there's something about this page. So this is what the layout is all about. Now the layout is basically how you place elements side by side. Here now we have an image here and we have a text here, and we have similar thing here, text here and an image here. So basically this is what the layout is all about, and the easiest way for us to achieve the layout is using Bootstrap. Now what is Bootstrap? So in our next class we'll be looking at what Bootstrap is and why we need Bootstrap. So catch you up in the next class, and bye for now.